From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I'm Vasilios. That is Sean Fazende. Remember to like, subscribe, rate, and review. You guys can find us wherever you listen to and watch your podcast. And if you happen to be watching on YouTube, hit the little bell notification button. After you subscribe, you get a notification every time we upload a new podcast. Sean, happy Friday to you. The Saints are away this week, as are you, when you inevitably fly out to the land of the 10,000 lakes tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning, that's correct.
Right. But just big picture, let's get right into it, because as we do every episode, as our watchers and listeners know.
Yeah. Before we get into that, so let me jump in there. Be sure to like, subscribe, rate, and review. A little something different today. If you're watching this video, you'll be able to also watch the entire podcast on Twitter or X as well. So follow me at Sean Fazende Fox 8. So what is your?
It's at Vasilios TV. That's Vasilios TV.
Just look for my tag on the tweet, because I know that's a hard name to look up. So just look. I tag him on every tweet, and you'll be able to check that out as well. Just a little something different, just to make sure we get it, the video version out to as many platforms as possible. And be sure to subscribe if you watch this via YouTube. So, anyway, continue, sir.
All good. So, like we do every episode, big picture. What's your read on where this team is as they head up to Minnesota?
It's a great question. It's a great, I've been trying to conceptualize, the feel of this team. Are they a confident team? Yes. Where are they at in the hierarchy of, good, bad, average, below average, whatever? So as they sit here 5-4, and you really just take each game and you try to formulate where they stand, to me, they've been good enough. Good enough. Do not confuse good enough with good, and certainly don't confuse good enough with great or elite. Good enough is good enough to win a game like last week, where the other team makes more mistakes than you, and you get a +5 takeaway margin, but you only win by 7 games. The offense plays well in certain spots. The defense plays well in certain spots. They don't marry together. It's a little bit of a disjointed game, but nonetheless, you were good enough to win that game. But good enough doesn't guarantee you a win, because they were good enough in Green Bay. They did outplay their opponent for 3.5, almost 3.5 quarters. And they lost that game. Good enough is a trap. A trap, because it's, when you look at it, the way I view a team, or the way I kind of break things down when I watch players, teams, whatever the case may be, the hierarchy I go by is, you have an average team, above average team, a good team, a great team, an elite team. Good enough to me is somewhere between slightly above average and good. That's where I think they stand. That's where I think 5-4 earned you. That's where I think it puts you in the hierarchy of the NFL. Good enough as they head into Week 10. Will that be good enough the rest of the way? That's why this game is so important, Sil. Because if you get the win and you get to 6-4 and you get to the spot where you are solidly on top of your division as you get into your bye week and into the middle of November, I think you officially move off of good enough into an officially a good team. Now, I don't know if the ceiling could ever touch great with this team. They'd have to really rally in December. But I do think it's obtainable to get to good status and good in this NFC. Who knows where they could take you, and it certainly can win you this division. Now, if they lose, on the flip side, you're in that eternal state of maybe, as we talked about months back, where you're in that eternal state of average, limbo. Possibly could, 5-5, we'll still be on top of the NFC South, probably tied for the NFC South, and depending on what other teams do, you're in that spot where you're talking yourself into things. Oh, well, maybe next week. Oh, well, maybe when we get back, we'll regroup and all that stuff.
Yep.
So to me, that's where I place the priority on this game, because I've been trying to figure it out and trying to articulate it in a way that kind of makes sense, but also puts the team in realistically captures where the team is. And that's why I believe this Sunday in Minnesota is so big, because a win, 6-4, as we just said, NFC South, but also 3 in a row. we've already said you went 3 in a row. I think you're officially on a roll. But another loss, you follow that pattern. Win 2, lose 2, win 1, lose 2. Now you're win 2, would you lose 1? That bumpy pattern that they have been on. So a crazy sort of opportunity awaits because of the circumstances involving the opponent. But still, I don't know if you have the injury report in front of you. I'm sure you could pull it up.
It'll take me all of 30 seconds.
They head into battle as healthy as they've ever been. They only have 2 guys out, Kendre Miller and Isaiah Foskey. Kendre Miller has been working in with the running back, so that's something to really watch. Isaiah Foskey has been sort of a rotational guy / special teamer.
I got it right here.
Read it off.
All right, so you already mentioned the first 2 there. Ryan Ramczyk had a rest day. It was limited today. Everybody else full practice. So,
and to get that in November for a team that's battled injury after injury over the last few years.
Yep.
Again, let me make sure the microphone hears it this time. It's better. That's how so I can knock on wood. Like, it's all right there. It's all right there. So you have a chance to really catapult yourself here and get out of that middle of the pack rut you've been in. I mean, do we agree here? I mean, because 6-4 to me, I think that now you've now, because I think if you get to 6-4 by the bye, the worst you're going to be is 9-8 at the absolute worst. But you probably can set yourself up for a 10-win season if you get to 6-4.
And you know, it would be exceptional in this division right now. And I mean, you look at any normal NFL season, you would rather be average to slightly above average and fully healthy rather than be transcendent and not have a healthy team.
Yeah, and honestly, there are things coming together in certain aspects of the team that show promise. It's just a matter of consistency. And as we've said last week, you can't really pinpoint if they're consistent yet until the next game comes. So it's an opportunity, and I guess we'll see what happens on Sunday. But I felt like from a big picture standpoint, this game maybe has a little more weight than perhaps we originally thought going into the week.
So the Saints have a lot of history with the Vikings. It's pretty bad for the most part, and you have plenty of experience in Minnesota too, with when traveling with the Saints.
Yes, I do. So first off, let me just share with the audience here. I am a New Orleans guy. I grew up in New Orleans. I was a die-hard Saints fan growing up. The first game I ever remember watching was the first playoff game the Saints were ever in. They got their butts whipped by the Minnesota Vikings, 44-10. I remember it. It was just like, wow. Bobby Hebert was the quarterback, the Dome Patrol, Dalton Hilliard, Ruben Mays, all those guys. So that was my first recollection of football, was this freaking Minnesota Vikings team that destroyed my Saints. I think the following year, 88, they went to Minnesota. They lost 45-3. I think they went again in 89. And then 2000, first playoff win was against the St. Louis Rams in the year 2000 with Aaron Brooks and those guys. Aaron Brooks was in the Dome the other day. But the following week, they went to Minnesota and got their butts whipped again by the Vikings. They ended their season once again. That year, I'm not sure they were expecting much more than a first-round wild card win that year because they had so many crazy things happen. But nonetheless, there's that team again. And then throughout the years, 2009 rolls around. This is the one outlier. This is the one outlier that you have because obviously that's the team the Saints beat to get to the Super Bowl and eventually win the Super Bowl. And I'm here to tell you, Sil, that was the most anxiety, the most I remember being so drained after that game because it was such a heavyweight fight. It went into overtime. The Saints didn't particularly play that well, and they were able to win that game with a couple of late interceptions and field goals. And there was a lot of mistakes in that game by both teams, and somehow the Saints were able to come out on top. So that was great. That Minnesota memory was fantastic. But then we get to 2017. And from 2017, the season opener in September through October of 2018, I was in Minnesota 4 different times, okay? 2017, the Saints got destroyed in the season opener on a Monday Night Football game. They just weren't ready. They were not. I believe Sam Bradford was the quarterback of the Vikings.
And that was before Case Keenum took over.
That was before Case Keenum took over. Then we went back for the divisional round of the playoffs. And I am literally in the press room about to book my flight to Philadelphia. And then the Minnesota Miracle happens. And then we were all just kind of looking around, just eyes wide open, stunned what just happened. And immediately I went to Twitter, and it was just crazy how all the tweets about what had just happened. I'm sure you watched it.
Of course I did. I was with a few of my former coworkers back then, and we were just jaws on the floor. I mean, the dude that made the play is a former University of Maryland guy, so they kind of had relevance to us where in the location where we were at. But yeah, just dead silence. I don't know how it was in the press box. Well,
we had already moved from the press box down to the post-game press area because sometimes in television, we got to leave a little early just because we got to get our spot because the elevator shut down and we didn't want to miss the post-game press conference. And that was just one of those things. Marcus Williams had kind of did some crazy lunge for a tackle, and he missed him, and he not just missed him, he knocked it was King Crawley on the sideline down, so he couldn't make the tackle, and Stephon Diggs scores. And all of a sudden, I just hit cancel on my phone. I wasn't booking that flight anymore. But that would have been that sucked. Obviously, that hurt. But I thought I was done with Minnesota at that point. No. The Saints run off the field, but they still have to kick the extra point. So some guys have to come back out, and none of the Saints players wanted to come back out. Only one guy came out, and it was Thomas Morstead. So Thomas Morstead comes out. There's a random Minnesota fan that thought was moved by this. He thought it was a great gesture. So he's like, let's donate to his charity. And he got a bunch of Minnesota Vikings fans to donate to that charity. Mm. So the Super Bowl was there a couple weeks later. And they sent me back to follow Thomas around as he was kind of doing his little stops with the different charities he was doing, and he met the fan that started it up, and it was a cool story. But it was one of those trips where it's like, I got on the plane, I stepped off the plane, and I worked until literally I got back on the plane a day and a half later. It just wore me out. Following October 2018, I went back again, and the Saints won that game I think it was a Sunday night game. It was 30-20. Drew didn't have a great game, but they won, so that was good. But then 2019, I thought was one of the Saints' best teams, and Minnesota knocked them out in the first round.
Was it the Kyle Rudolph push-off?
Kyle Rudolph in the dome.
Yeah.
It was so disappointing because I thought that team really had enough to make a run in the playoffs, and it was just kind of like, oh, it's over? I mean, it was bad. It really was. So they lose that game. And if you recall last year in London, the double doink. It's bad, man. It's bad. It's bad. It's just there's something about this matchup with this franchise, and that franchise is just...
And it's even worse in Minnesota.
It's worse in Minnesota. I mean...
By the numbers I found for game plan earlier this week, they're 4-14 all-time in Minnesota.
And, dude, that year in Minnesota, we were there for the playoffs for the Miracle. They have that thing where you can walk between buildings downtown, like in this inside kind of... It's almost like a above-ground tunnel almost. Mm. It was broken. Or it was not available. So we had to walk where we were parked like 3 blocks in it was negative degree weather. I don't know. It was well below zero. And we had to wait outside to get in because there was a long line to get in. I was like, this is just absolutely miserable. We had a 3-hour tailgate show that day. 3-hour tailgate show. And it would have all been worth it had they won that game. And you saw what happened. So it was certainly a bizarre set of circumstances. So I'll be back on Sunday and hopefully get a little bit more of that 2018 result against the Vikings, because other than that, it hadn't been a good place for the Saints.
No, not at all. But any concerns heading into this weekend, last-minute concerns here?
Well, we'll monitor the Justin Jefferson situation. Remember last year in London, I mean, he really cooked Marshawn Lattimore. He really cooked him. We'll see. It doesn't feel like he's going to play, but we'll see. The Josh Dobbs situation is interesting because if he were a great quarterback, he'd be starting. But I feel like we've inflated what he accomplished last week and talked about his running ability. I wonder if that comes back down to earth a little bit. If the Saints can somehow just keep that contained, even if he gets out a few times, he reverts back to... He's been a backup his whole career.
Yeah, he started this season, though, instead of Kyler Murray because Kyler Murray's been injured. But, I mean, he's had a pretty decent season for a guy who hasn't being a starting quarterback.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. But that concerns me because you don't know what to expect. I don't think the Saints know what to expect. I feel like one half is like it's Josh Dobbs. He hadn't done anything in his entire career. He's had a few starts this year.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, he's kind of got a little bit of momentum, and he does one thing that the Saints seem to struggle with. That's mobile quarterbacks. But he's still. I mean, the Saints defense should still be able to keep him somewhat in control.
You'd think, right? But we thought the same thing last week.
And then there's something else, and it's we probably didn't spend enough time on this. And I'm going to talk a lot about it on the pregame show, the tailgate show Sunday. That stadium is not an easy place to play from a crowd noise standpoint.
Really? I've never been.
Like, it's like, you see we got these headphones on? You know, like when you can't hear anything with headphones, it just deafens you?
Yeah.
It's like that white noise. It just cuts everything off. I've always said this, the Superdome, when it's loud, it's that rattling, piercing in your eardrum. But with the U.S. Bank Stadium, it's like an explosion goes off and you can't hear anything. It's crazy how different the sound is. So that's something I'm really going to monitor, because that can give this offense fits, because there's a lot of communication going on, before the play. So that's something to really watch in this game. If they just have any kind of communication issues, just getting the play in and play out.
Any final thoughts, or is it that all you got?
I think that's the final thoughts right there. I will see you guys in Minnesota in a couple days, and hopefully bring back a W on Monday.
Sean, safe travels. We'll talk to you on Monday.
All right.
For Sean Fazende, I'm Vasilios. This has been the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. We'll catch you guys next time.